Let's start on Capitol Hill yesterday. We have a whole lot of video because basically the cameras were trained on every member of Congress who was essential in this negotiation process yesterday. And I'm going to tease right now that actually we have some video potentially that suggests Donald Trump might be interested in taking the speakership. That's not a joke. We'll get into that in just a moment. But let's start with Kevin McCarthy. After he was voted, if you were following along yesterday, there was a vote on what is called the motion to vacate. The motion to vacate is what Kevin McCarthy agreed to bring back. Nancy Pelosi did away with it. It had always been there, but Nancy Pelosi did away with it after watching actually what then Congressman Mark Meadows tried to do to John Boehner. Boehner steps down.
Just quit.
Right. This goes
like,
to 2015.
I'm not dealing with this. I'm out of here. Yeah.
Right. And so Nancy Pelosi sees that, gets rid of it when she takes over again in 2019. And Kevin McCarthy agreed to bring it back in order to secure the support of people like Matt Gaetz in January. He would not have been the speaker. This is the catch-22. He would not have been the speaker without bringing back the motion to vacate. He never would have been the speaker. Yeah. And now he is the first speaker to ever be ousted. Ever. This is a first in American history. A lot of times we think things are unprecedented and they actually aren't. This is really unprecedented. It only happened once in 1910 that there was an attempt, but never successfully. Joe Cannon survived that attempt.
And he got an office building.
That's right, he did. I don't think there's going to be a McCarthy office building because, well, for a number of reasons that we'll get into. But let's play this first clip of Kevin McCarthy talking after the vote.
My goals have not changed. My ability to fight is just in a different form. You need 218. Unfortunately, 4% of our conference can join all the Democrats and dictate who can be the Republican speaker in this House. I don't think that rule is good for the institution, but apparently I'm the only one. I believe I can continue to fight, maybe in a different manner. I will not run for speaker again. I'll have the conference pick somebody else. I think today was a political decision by the Democrats. And I think the things they have done in the past hurt the institution. When they just started removing people from committee. And they just started doing the other things. And my fear is the institution fell today. Because you can't do the job if 8 people, you have 94% or 96% of your entire conference, but 8 people can partner with the whole other side. How do you govern?
And when you look back, is there anything you could have done differently to what those 8 members?
Yeah, a lot of them I helped get elected, so I probably should have picked somebody else.
He was trying to put on a brave face.
Yeah, and he took a lot of questions, basically, until there were almost no more questions. If we can put up A1, we can run through the list of people who bailed on Kevin McCarthy. Some of these are the obvious ones, but then let's talk about a few of these. For people who are not watching this, it's Biggs, Buck, Burchett, Crane, Gaetz, Good, Mace, Rosendale. Burchett said, do you know the backstory on this? That Burchett told McCarthy that he was going to pray on how he was going to vote, and McCarthy made fun of him for that. And he was like, I don't have to pray on it anymore.
There you go. There's your answer.
I'm a yes, you're out. Nancy Mace told him that she had been misled by McCarthy on how House Republicans were going to deal with the abortion rights issue. In other words, she thought that there was some way she could drag Republicans back from the brink or out of the wilderness on abortion. McCarthy, in that press conference that we just played later in it, he was asked about this, and he said, I spoke to Mace's chief of staff, and he assured me that I never misled them on anything. And if he gets fired for me revealing that he told me this, I'll find him a job. It was kind of a freewheeling, weird press conference.
Yes, and there was a lot of that yesterday. Yeah. Did you notice that? It was, it was so chaotic that all kinds of things seemed to be getting revealed and dripped out left and right.
Yeah.
And that's one of the interesting things about McCarthy's press conference. He didn't lead with this, but he actually revealed in the press conference that he has quote, seen the text. Yes. This is a quote from him. I have seen the texts. And for Matt Gaetz, it's all personal. So Matt Gaetz leads this charge, which ends up in a 216 to 210 vote, getting people like Nancy Mace. And to this point about Nancy Mace, it looks a lot like she was looking for a reason to vote against Kevin McCarthy, which is very surprising because she's not a Freedom Caucus member. She's not hardcore at all. I don't know how the heck this is going to play in her district, but it sounds like she came up with a reason that she voted against Kevin McCarthy, not that that reason was genuinely weighing on her, but that she decided she had to vote against Kevin McCarthy and this was going to be the reason.
Yeah, she represents Charleston, and Democrats have thought that they have had a shot at taking her out in the past. She's won fairly comfortably, but she's kind of on the radar, whereas the Freedom Caucus folks in general, like they're nowhere near Democrats' radar. They're like, we're not touching you guys. Tell us a little bit more about that, what he means by I've seen the texts.
Yeah.
So McCarthy basically saying this is somewhat related to an ethics complaint against Gaetz, and that Gaetz is trying to take out the speaker to block that investigation or something. Like what is McCarthy alleging there?
Or the other theory that I have heard is that Gaetz has his vendetta against McCarthy because McCarthy didn't do enough to stop the ethics investigation into Matt Gaetz as it has been transpiring. And so it's interesting because everyone is being very cagey about the potential contents of that ethics investigation, about where it stands. And the ethics committee is always like that. It's pretty closed up in your experience, right? Yeah, it's impenetrable. And so we don't totally understand what's going on here.
So the one clue there, I've seen the texts. Are these allegedly incriminating text messages that Gaetz is involved in? Is that what we're supposed to be led to believe by this cryptic allegation that the ousted speaker dropped in his press conference?
I'm assuming what he's saying is that Gaetz was texting other people, other members, to suggest that his personal problem with Kevin McCarthy is the reason he led this ouster. Now, the ostensible reason, of course, is that McCarthy went along with the stopgap continuing resolution over the weekend.
Right.
He came to a deal to prevent a government shutdown only for the next 45 days, by the way.
Right.
It's very likely that the government would still at least be on the brink of a shutdown around Christmas time, if not totally shut down around Christmas time. And Matt Gaetz, Matt Rosendale, Bob Good, those other folks were saying he should have shut the government down. And from the perspective of conservatives, and especially if you think of this from the perspective of like grassroots conservatives, you're just being asked to pick your poison, right? And Matt Stoller had a great tweet where he was like, good for Republicans, like Congress deserves to go up in flames. I'm paraphrasing here, but like, and I don't mean that literally, I don't think Stoller even said that, but like Congress deserves to, be turned into this chaotic scene. Good for Republicans for doing it. And I completely understand that sentiment. I think it's absolutely true. And that's what people have been saying on the right since the Tea Party. But that's what they already did to Kevin McCarthy. I mean, they went through 15 ballots in January. They went just about as far as they felt they could with the debt ceiling back in May. That is where Kevin McCarthy lost their trust. They thought he should have pushed further on the debt ceiling. So after that, summer comes and goes. They feel like he doesn't push far enough right now. They thought he should have pushed it to a shutdown instead of going with that CR. So again, it's pick your poison. Do you want these like sort of little victories with Kevin McCarthy where you're reforming the House and you're getting the House back into a situation where you have the motion to vacate, where you have these appropriations bills on single subjects, which is one of the things that they're still fighting over. Do you want that? Or do you want to shut down the government and sort of take a shot across the bow and send a message to sort of the Republican establishment? Either way, there's nothing happening to spending. Like, spending is going to continue to, neither of those options actually seriously impacts what they want to deal with, which is Ukraine aid money, which is the size of the federal budget. None of this is going to deal with that.
And let's play a little Gaetz color, and then I have a question about Gaetz' strategy for you that I think probably a lot of viewers have as well. So here's a little flavor of Gaetz' speech making on the floor right before the vote.
The opening line of my colleague's speech was that Speaker McCarthy always overperforms expectations, but after tweeting, "Bring it," and after engaging in profane-laced tirades at House conference, he just lost a motion to table. So I wouldn't necessarily consider that overperforming expectations. And time and again, I've heard my colleagues say that, well, he deserves it because he went through a tough speaker contest. Let me let everyone know he prevailed in that speaker contest because he made an agreement to fulfill certain commitments to make this an open and honest process, and he has failed to meet those commitments, and that's why we are here. I reserve.
To whose benefit? People have called you a narcissist. People say that it's to your benefit alone. Is it to the benefit of you? and to Donald Trump.
It's the benefit of this country that we have a better Speaker of the House than Kevin McCarthy. Kevin McCarthy couldn't keep his word. He made an agreement in January regarding the way Washington would work, and he violated that agreement. We are $33 trillion in debt. We are facing $2.2 trillion annual deficits. We face a de-dollarization globally that will crush Americans, working-class Americans. Kevin McCarthy is a feature of the swamp. He has risen to power by collecting special interest money and redistributing that money in exchange for favors. We are breaking the fever now, and we should elect a speaker who's better.
McCarthy then said, look, this is personal. This wasn't political. This is, Matt Gaetz just doesn't like me.
Right.
Nothing I did wrong. He just doesn't like me. Gaetz later said that if Scalise became Speaker, that would be a wonderful thing. He likes Scalise. Scalise is McCarthy's deputy, basically.
Yeah.
And not a whole lot, you know the Republican conference better, not a ton of daylight between McCarthy and Scalise. And everything that McCarthy did over the past 9 months, was done with his deputy at his side, Scalise, who's also a swamp creature.
Yes.
So how are people who are loving what Gaetz is doing, and hey, who doesn't love good spectacle, supposed to feel about what happens if you just rotate in Steve Scalise at the end of this? Which we're going to get to who is going to be rotated in, but let's say it's him.
But that's, so you have the same question as Newt Gingrich, and maybe this is the first time that's happened, but he was on Hannity last night, and his quote was basically, why did they think this was better? And that's what's so frustrating. We'll play in just a minute Jim Jordan and Thomas Massie essentially saying the same thing. You are not going to get a better Speaker of the House for Freedom Caucus goals than Kevin McCarthy, and that's not because Kevin McCarthy is a Freedom Caucus light member. It's simply because he was so transactional that he gave them a lot of wins, knowing that he could do that over and over again. So that's where this frustration is bubbling over to the surface, and that's where we can roll a 5. This is Jim Jordan and Thomas Massie on the floor of the House. After the motion to table the motion to vacate failed, they all got to come in and give speeches on the motion to vacate itself. Matt Gaetz had to use the Democrats' microphone because the Republicans weren't giving him the microphone. There was so much petty nonsense and squabbling going back and forth yesterday. But here's Jim Jordan and Thomas Massie.
I thank the gentleman for yielding. On January 3rd, we said the 118th Congress is about 3 things. Pass the bills that need passed, do the oversight work that needs to be done, and stop the inevitable omnibus that comes from the United States Senate right before the holidays. Kevin McCarthy has been rock solid on all 3.
Mr. Speaker, as the only still serving co-author and co-sponsor of the motion to vacate Speaker Boehner, I can tell you this motion to vacate is a terrible idea. As the only member who's serving here who took every chance to vote against Speaker Boehner and to vote against Speaker Ryan, I can tell you that this chamber has been run better, more conservatively, and more transparently under Mr. McCarthy than any other speaker that I have served under. As a member of the Rules Committee, one of three conservatives who were placed there out of trust, the Speaker gave us a blocking position by putting 3 of us on there to keep an eye on the Rules Committee, to make sure the process was fair and even. I can tell you it's been fair and even. None of us are voting against the Speaker today. Regular order is at odds with predetermined outcomes. Yet the Speaker is being accused of not holding to regular order and predetermined outcomes at the same time.
And Ryan, maybe we should chase that with our last clip, which is Chip Roy reacting after the vote. Let's play A6.
Come at me and call me a rhino, you can kiss my ass. Look, I've spent a lifetime fighting for limited government conservatism. I have laid it all on the line. I've not seen my family but for 2 days in the last 30 days. You go around talking your big game and you thumping your chest on Twitter. Yeah, come to my office and come have a debate, mother. You know why? Because I'm standing up for this country every single day.
Right. But so let's peel back. I love that. It's just you can't beat this.
Right.
But let's peel back Massie's substance that he was laying out there, because he makes an interesting point. And I think if you don't follow Congress, it would be easy to miss what he was saying. So he's saying Matt Gaetz wants regular order in the House, which means all of these bills go through all of these different committees. Everybody gets involved, and whatever the final product is, you put that on the floor, and then you move that over to the Senate. He wants individual spending bills. That was his mantra on the floor yesterday. That's been the thing that he's been calling for. Massey also says that Gaetz wants a predetermined outcome, which is cutting spending to this, to this specific level or whatever level you can. And Massey rightly points out those are not the same thing. And to demand both of them is just completely incoherent. And in fact, if I were going to be an advisor to the right, say, look, you want to cut a lot of spending, CRs are your way to do it.
Yeah.
Because it takes a hatchet all across the top. You just say, this is the number, figure it out.
Interesting.
If you go in with every committee and let everybody sort it out, every one of those people is interested in their own kind of spending projects. And so it goes to the question of whether or not this was a coherent political project or whether it was like a personality thing or just a kind of long-term power building for a far-right faction.
And I think the CR, and you know this, I think the CR thing is for people like Massey, who's a hardcore libertarian, it's to sort of weed out those de facto earmarks that people will pack into a big bill. If you do single subjects, then it's harder to do poison pills. It's harder to add, kind of quasi earmarks into these things and stuff them with random stuff.
We got rid of earmarks for 15 years, and government spending's still went up. So
I think it's a totally fair point. That would be their argument, and it is really interesting that you have people like Jim Jordan and Thomas Massey. So you can think that Jim Jordan and Thomas Massey have been sucked into the swamp and are now totally co-opted by special interests and the Republican elite. Or you can think that, Matt Gaetz and Jim Jordan are at odds for a legitimate reason, and that Matt Gaetz and Chip Roy are at odds for a legitimate reason. Some people have issues with Jim Jordan because he's been close to Kevin McCarthy for years. And I mean, some people in the conservative movement, they've seen that as sort of suspect because Kevin McCarthy intentionally reached out to Jim Jordan. He was talking to me about this last year. He was actually almost bragging about how clever he had been at reaching out to Jim Jordan years ago after he stepped into the minority leadership post. He was really intentional about reaching out to Jim Jordan. People feel like he's done the same with Thomas Massey. People have sort of been annoyed by Thomas Massey for being so defensive of Kevin McCarthy. Either way, these are guys who led the charge against Boehner. They're not going to, and Chip Roy is somebody who's basically like untouchable from a conservative perspective. As you can see his frustration boil over, he knows that. And so, I think that's the point. Like they worked really, really hard to have a transactional relationship with Kevin McCarthy that worked for them. And they got a lot of leverage. They extracted a lot of concessions out of Kevin McCarthy, and that relationship was just completely blown up. Again, I get the Stoller sentiment in there too. Like, either way, the Uniparty's winning. Matt Gaetz is wrong that they just broke the fever. That didn't happen. But it is a shot across the bow, for sure.
It's every single revolution that you read about, you find Massey and Roy characters who were on the leading edge at the beginning of the revolution and stay kind of where they are politically throughout the revolution. But the revolution drives, it eats its children, as a phrase that came from the French Revolution, but it also pushes people to more extreme positions, just the nature of it. And then people like Roy and Massey find themselves outflanked to the right by new people who've come in who weren't part of the original revolution. And so people like Roy and Massey are like, where were you when we were storming the Bastille? Get out of town. Like, don't tell. And the new people are like, the Bastille, there was nothing even in there.
Right. Hey, if you liked that video, don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe to Breaking Points.
If you want to see the rest of Counterpoints, go to breakingpoints.com to become a premium member and get the full uncut show every morning in your inbox and on Spotify.
Help us build independent news and get the full show every morning at breakingpoints.com.